Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square.
And I'm Sam Osterhout, the executive producer here at Lincoln Square.
And welcome to the weekly assignment, where Sam and I talk to you about what's coming up this week on Lincoln Square, the latest headlines, and what we can all do to fight back against authoritarianism. Sam, thanks for being back. We missed you so much.
Last week, man, what happened? Feel
I
like
know,
it's all a blur. Fortunately, the news stopped. There's no
right?
news that's happening, and sorry, Randy, I almost made you do a spit take there.
Exactly.
Well, there's
Like
plenty of
I'm
news,
like what world are we in?
right? I know there's just so much going on. And so we are so pleased to have AFT President Randi Weingarten joining us again. She has been on to talk about her book. And, Randy, I feel like during this election season, we haven't talked as much about education issues. I think that there's so much going on with the Trump administration, so many terrible things that they're doing that they're getting away with a lot when it comes to education. So I think you're the perfect person for us to talk to today.
They're actually pulling away from all the responsibilities that Congress and the people, presidents, have taken, and Congress and the people have given to them over the course of the last 60 years, like since Brown versus Board of Education, that case. So they're walking away from all of that. There's a amazing Washington Post article today about how they're walking away from all civil rights responsibilities and the Office of Civil Rights. But the other thing that they're doing is they are actually really basically throttling the future of kids. So all the stuff that they've done with vouchers or with the ed tax credits, all of this is designed to try to create, defunding of public systems. All you have to do is look at what happened in Arizona and public schools. But then the big ugly bill, if you think about that. So I'm not even talking about whether there should be a Department of Education or not. Like let's not put form over substance right now. Let's put that away for a second. The assault on higher education, the defunding of public schools all throughout the country through this voucher movement, which basically, pays the people who get most of the vouchers are people who already send their kids to private schools. But it has really created, as I said, in Arizona, this defunding. And then you have the big bill, the tax bill that was passed last year. And so there was a huge cut to Medicaid. Who does Medicaid disproportionately help? Kids, all the medical stuff that happens in schools happens through Medicaid. Then you had, so you have rural hospitals closing, you have huge cuts to healthcare in terms of kids. Then you had that huge cut in SNAP and nutrition. Who is that disproportionately hurting? Kids. Then on top of it, let's go back to higher education. The third big cut that just has shown up this July is the cut to all the student loan programs. So essentially, the federal government basically is the big provider of student borrowing for virtually everyone who goes to college. Like 40 million people have student loan debt. So unless you're rich, everyone who goes to college takes out loans. And basically it's the federal government that is the provider of that. So this is what they did. They took away literally all the programs with the exception of public service loan forgiveness, which they changed, but they took away all the other student loan repayment programs, and they replaced them with a new program that started on July 1st, which essentially is going to cost virtually everyone about $4,000 more a year. So if you already couldn't pay, so I'll give you an example of, because we're having this campaign now, of people telling us about their one big bill. So I'll give you this example. We have one AFT member, sorry, I put my glasses on, a teacher from Kansas, who saw her monthly payment jump from 57 to $815 a month. So, how do you do that? And
Hmm.
this just happened in July. It's like, so you got 44 million Americans with student loans. 7 million immediately got hit because they were kicked out of the Biden Save program that ended. But
Hmm.
all these other people now are going to see increases up to around averaging $4,000 a year at the same exact time as gas prices are too high and grocery prices are too high and housing costs are too high and
And
with all
healthcare.
and healthcare is broken, and then with all of the other stuff that's going on with AI, no wonder people are moving back to their parents' homes after college. So when I say that this administration has really, that young people have really taken it on the chin,
Hmm.
you got no guardrails in terms of screens and in terms of AI. Basically, big tech is able to do everything they want. You got no guardrails. You got Melania walking down the White House with a robot. You have them taking away all of the civil rights rules in the Department of Education. And now, basically, in terms of higher education, you basically have a bill that most regular Americans are paying so that people who are rich got tax cuts. So they don't care about the future. They don't care about kids. And you're seeing it everywhere. And that's what's so pathetic about this administration. They don't care about kids. I've never seen a Republican or a Democratic administration that didn't at least say they cared about kids, but
Right.
they don't care about public schools. They have an assault on higher education, and now they're taking away all of the subsidies that kids got, from nutrition to healthcare to higher education.
I don't want to force you into their brains because that's a terrifying place. But I always think about, if you are enacting a policy, then you're trying to solve a particular problem. But the problems, it's so clear that these solutions are not solutions to particular problems, right?
No,
What are their stated goals with these policies, and what do you believe are the actual goals? Is it just privatization? Is it, because it's clearly not outcomes, right?
no, no. I think, and you saw I wrote about this last year in the book that was released last year. I think they are afraid of kids having a brain. I think they're afraid of, I think when you see this with authoritarians all over the world, they're afraid of two things. What does public education do? What does higher education do? It creates opportunity, broad-based opportunity. But there's not a level playing field. Like someone who has rich parents and they stumble and fall, their parents can actually provide for them, whether it's tutoring or whether it's a summer camp, or you can do what parents who are poor, lower middle class, or middle class have, is they have their public schools. So if
Hmm.
you defund the public schools, so all of a sudden the public schools don't have an art program anymore, don't have a music program anymore, have higher class sizes. You see what's happening in terms of special needs. Remember what I just said about no more Office of Civil Rights complaints. How do you enforce opportunity for kids with special needs if the federal government has no place to go anymore, if a school district is not helping a kid who's wheelchair bound? So when you look at, I'm not saying that everything was perfect, it wasn't, but you had a system in place that had basically opportunity for all kids. That's called public education. They're defunding it. They'll say it's about choice, but frankly, if you don't make sure that the public schools are a great choice, this is now becoming the school's choice, not a parent's choice. So give me a break. And so when you then assault higher education, and you basically say that higher education is teaching the wrong things. Really? Higher education is about getting a degree that's going to help you have economic prosperity. That's what it's always been about. So, for the first time, when you have more and more and more kids who are first generation going to higher education, that's when we're stopping. That's when we're throttling it back. So, that's why I'm saying there is a fear of pluralism, having this kind of public space where people who don't know each other get together. That's the public square of higher education. That's the public square of public schools. And then the second is that what are you really doing in schooling? You're
Mhm.
teaching kids how to think, not
Right.
what to think, but how to think. So it's teaching kids to be together, to actually understand difference, to tolerate difference, to understand people who are different from each other, to understand that we live in a big society, congealed society. That's the fundamentals of democracy. And the second piece is that you're teaching them how to think and how to navigate their lives. And I think if you look at authoritarianism throughout
Mm.
history, there is a fear of both of those things. So
Right.
everything is undermining pluralism and kids actually being able to have the skills and knowledge to navigate their lives.
Right. Teaching kids how to think is very threatening to authoritarians. To your point, your book was why fascists feared teachers, and so that's really the point that
Just
we're
so
at.
happen to have one.
There you go. Um, I wanted to zero in on this student debt problem because I feel like this hasn't gotten a lot of attention
No.
in the budget bill that passed last year, because a lot of its bombs are timed for after the election, especially with cuts to healthcare. But some of them we're seeing the immediate impact now, and student loans are one of them. You wrote about this with your piece in MS Now,
Right.
and it seems like this was a huge issue during the Biden presidency, and there was some progress that was made, not as much as people would like. The Supreme Court definitely played a role there in trying to stop that. But now you talk about the fact that for the Trump administration, this isn't about mismanagement. This is about them intentionally breaking it. Talk to
Exactly.
us about that. Talk to us about what that means.
So, look, the student loan um, uh, framework in the United States has never been good. Let me just say this. I mean, and remember, Obama took all of it from Sally Mae and
Mm-hmm.
made it part of the federal, infrastructure through the Department of Education. So I don't want to get tied into you. We can always make things better. Bureaucracy can always be made better. And the Obama administration, frankly, the Biden administration didn't do a great job with any of this anyway, but they were trying as opposed to trying to break it, even worse. So what has happened is that 44 million people to go to college now take out or took out student loans that through the federal student loan process. So what Biden was trying to do was two things. One, all the people who had gotten what was called public service loan forgiveness. That's a lot of our members, firefighters, police officers, people in the military. They were promised, and this was a bipartisan promise, that in exchange for working in the public service for 10 years, all your loans, the rest of your loans will be forgiven. And that started in 2007. The first year that loans were supposed to be forgiven was 2017. Betsy DeVos was the head of the Department of Education. Literally, 98% of the student loans that were supposed to be forgiven got denied, and 2% got forgiven. So, something's wrong with the process there. That's now been totally reversed. And that's the work that Biden did with us. We sued a few times, we got a bunch of different things. So there's a lot of people who, firefighters, police officers, nurses, teachers, who have gotten that bipartisan promise. But the
Mhm.
second big thing that Biden tried to do was this. During COVID, Trump, it's not Biden, it was Trump. Trump said, okay, nobody has to pay a student loan right now because of COVID. So student loans were put on hold, and they were put on hold for a long time. Biden inherits this. And what he says is this. He says, look, if we're going to turn the faucet back on repayment of student loans, let's actually have a way to cushion it so that people have a cushion a bit. And that was the $10,000 payment piece that he was trying to do. Okay, we're going to forgive $10,000 as a way of cushioning the repayment of student loans. That's what the Supreme Court nixed and said no to. So then what Biden tried to do is say, okay, let's actually make the loan payments such that people will pay their loans back, not default, because we already have 7 million people have defaulted on their student loans already. We have an affordability crisis. We just lost 23,000 jobs last month. So like you can't keep on saying to regular people, you got to pay more and you have less. So he put together all these new repayment plans, and that's what the Trump tax bill took away. And Linda McMahon, I was going to call her Betsy McMahon. What does Linda McMahon do? The first thing she does in terms of the student debt crisis, she tells people she's sending them to collection agencies if they don't pay their bills. So, how does a young person basically start life if all of a sudden they have student loan defaults, they have credit problems? And now they have now done all their new plans to replace all the Biden plans. And these
Mhm.
plans now literally will cost people 2 or 3 or 4 times as much money, averaging about $4,000 a year more. That's what Mike Pierce and I wrote. And it's July, it's a year afterwards. So they haven't said a one word to anybody about this. They're just hoping that this will be the pay for the tax breaks to the wealthy, and that if first generation young people don't go to college, so be it. That's why I say it throttles opportunity.
But at the same time, the Trump administration has offered loan forgiveness for one group of people.
Oh yeah,
ICE,
big
ICE,
time.
ICE agents get it, not teachers, not
No,
firefighters. So, what does that say about the Trump administration's priorities?
well, it tells you, I mean, it speaks volumes about their priorities. And it tells you that they know that this is not simply ignorance that they're doing all this. They know exactly what they're doing. All you have to do is read Project 2025. They know exactly what they are doing. They are really trying to say that regular folks, Black and brown kids who are first generation going to college, people whose families are poor or lower middle class who can't afford college, they're saying, you need not go, you need not apply. And yet, the things that they want, like getting more ICE agents, they understand that student debt repayment and student debt forgiveness is a big lure to get people into those jobs. So it is like one slice of what you know Bush and Hillary Clinton and Ted Kennedy did. They said, no, don't just do one slice of it. Do all of public service. Do teachers, do nurses, do firefighters. Don't just do one slice of it. And you hear my anger because this is the kind of cruelty and cravenness and that this administration is doing. The thing they want, they know how to use the federal government to get it. That's why you know that this is cruel, not just incompetence.
I feel like we should forgive ICE student payment or student loans if they promise to major in the humanities, right?
You mean
Um,
even understanding the Constitution and applying
I
it?
mean,
Like
I'm only teasing. Yes,
how
exactly.
about just a little due process? Like the fact that one of my members, a custodian in Florida, St. John's School District, just last week going to work. He had a work permit. He has an asylum application. He had the right to be the United States, taken by ICE. Shackled, taken by ICE. Sorry.
It's it's no, it's I mean
So
this is the
angry.
kind of anger that we need to absolutely feel. And I have friends in debt collective and working in higher ed, debt consolidation and forgiveness and all of that. And so it's been an issue. And I have young children who aren't so young anymore, and I'm worried about how I'm going to send them to college myself. But it does seem like the problem has been like, well, the house is flammable. We need to fix the flammable house. The house is now on fire,
The house is
right?
on fire.
Do
And
you
and
go
and
ahead?
the other, I would just say the other thing, Sam, one of the pieces I didn't talk about is that since the 2008 recession, you see fewer and fewer states actually subsidizing higher ed. How many times do I hear, do we see? I mean, we are now the largest union of higher ed workers. So you see the cost of higher ed going up and up and up. And it's not because people are paid more. You or also see that the number of tenured professors versus adjuncts have totally flipped. It used to be like when I went to college, 70% of your professors were on an adjunct track. I'm 69 years old, 68 years old. Now 7% of professors are adjunct. So it's completely flipped. And so it's not that the employees are costing more. What's happened is that the state share, the investment that the federal government and states made, the investment after the GI Bill has whittled away. So we're in the same place as after World War II, where, and I'm a big believer in career tech ed. I think there should be other pathways, but we need to provide pathways to children, to young people for opportunity. And if you look at virtually everything that has happened in terms of opportunity, they have ratcheted back opportunity for all. For those who are rich, they have it. For everybody else, it's been ratcheted back in so many different ways. And that's the argument that we're making. And it's not as in your so glad that you asked the question, because you know it's not the first things that are primal are gas costs and grocery costs and housing costs, and God forbid somebody has a real sickness, healthcare costs. But ultimately, if you can't pay for college and you can't get a student debt to pay for college, or now after you've paid for college, 44 million people, all of a sudden the student debt payment is now 3, 4 times as much as it was, how are you going to operate? How are you going to live? How's your family going to live? And that's huge part of the affordability crisis and the opportunity crisis. That's
So
my
is
point.
and I think my point about the house being on fire is that it's really hard to ignore. Like all of us, middle class and everyone except the very few at the very top
Right.
understand exactly what the hell is going on right now. Is this our opportunity?
Yes.
Where do we go from here? And is this, when all hope seems lost, maybe the time we turn it around? And maybe I'm just
No, I think I
too
think
hopeful.
there's two things. This is part of the reason why I'm so grateful I'm on with the two of you. I said I'd be on for 4 hours. So grateful for that. But that's why we started this campaign called One Big Bill, because this is a silent crisis. and people feel very shamed about it. So they're like, oh my God, did I miss something? Did I miss a notice? Like, how did my bill kind of become 2 or 3 times as much? No, it's intentional. The federal government did it. Trump did it as part of, the big ugly bill. So we're trying to create a sense of education about this by having this campaign saying, one big bill, tell us what your new bills are, because we know we need to create some noise about this, and people need to see that they're not alone in this. And I would say this is where elections really matter, because frankly, Congress can fix this. They can get a bill onto the president's desk, look, and maybe like the housing bill, he doesn't sign it, he doesn't veto it, but we have to correct this. And this is something that Congress can do. Student debt is now a federal responsibility. And so Congress can actually make these plans different. They can change the law, just like they made it worse with the one ugly tax bill. They can make it better by changing these repayment plans.
A lot of people are concerned about student achievement, especially post-COVID, with falling test scores in a lot of areas. And at least at the state level, there are still Democrats and Republicans that are working on solutions and trying to address this. But it seems like out of the Trump administration, their big one-size-fits-all solution is just robots teaching our children and AI. We have a clip of the current education secretary, Linda McMahon, talking about her conversation with who she calls Mark Zuckerberg about the future of all this.
I've been to the Alpha School, and I have seen AI at work in the Alpha School. It is a total enhancement for those students. They spend the first couple of hours with AI, and then the rest of the day they are implementing things that they've learned. It is remarkable. And I think we have to have guardrails. Teachers have to be trained in AI. Parents should be involved. They should make sure that they're comfortable, with the kind of curriculum that is being presented to their children, as with everything. But AI is here to stay. We need to embrace it. We can't let China lead in AI. We need to have the breakthroughs in AI coming from, Boise or Birmingham or Brooklyn, and they shouldn't be coming from China. And let's embrace this technology. And I like, what Meta is doing when they are talking about their betting on people. And I've had brief conversations with Mark Zuckerberg and how he is really devoted to making sure that AI is developed and embraced in the proper way.
Yeah.
So, Randi, I know that you have a plan called Devices Down, Eyes Up, Hands On. And it's basically a tech tax on big tech companies to fund schools, and a binding agreement between these companies and schools so that there are some guardrails. Talk to us about this.
So there's 4 things about this. Number one, let me just say, those Alpha schools, we asked to see them. They won't let us see them. That's a really good hint that somebody doesn't want, if they won't let the teachers or teachers union see what they're doing, there's a problem.
That's 2, why they won't let Congress people into ICE detention facilities.
Correct.
It's the same thing.
Number 2, they charge parents thousands of dollars for these Alpha schools. Number 1 and number 2. Number 3, we were the first union. We are working with some big tech. We're working with Microsoft. We're working with Anthropic. We're working with OpenAI. We started our own AI institute last August to try to train teachers about how to use AI. And we have said over and over again, sorry to get so angry at Linda McMahon, that there needs to be guardrails about things like student privacy, like data. And we're working with these entities that we're working with to try and actually have a gold standard. This should be done in legislation. This should be done in regulation. This administration should have done this months and months and months ago. So yes, teachers need to know AI is not going anywhere. Teachers need to know how to use it. And we're trying to do that outside of any help from the federal government. Number 4, this is where the federal government really is to blame. There's now enough research over the course of the last 10 years that screens have actually been a deterrent to learning. Now, it's not causative. We don't have that. We have correlative research. So if we know this, why are you trying to get more screens and more robots as opposed to actually trying to create ways of limiting screens for the youngest kids? That's what LA did. That's what my speech called for. So, yes, we have to teach kids long term about digital literacy, but let's actually teach kids how to think first and not have what they call cognitive offloading, which is to actually have muscles atrophy and not be used because kids are focused too much on screens or too much on somebody else giving them the information. So this really takes some thought about how you do this work. And then the last thing I'll say is, and that's where the tech tax comes in. How do you pay for this huge disruption? This is a seismic change in our country. So, who's the burden going to be on? Individuals who have no control and no power? Somebody who has lost their job? Somebody who can't get a job? Or are we going to actually say that these companies who are about to make a boatload of money, or the federal government, you want to be in a race for China? Then actually make sure that the regular people in the country, the real people in the country, are not being burdened by this change in technology. Don't just let your friends in Meta, your friends in Tesla, your friends in Palantir actually run the table. Let regular people not feel the disruption, not just about data centers and about electricity, but about this huge change that's about to happen. That's my disagreement with Linda McMahon and Donald Trump. Not that AI is not going to be here. Of course, it's going to be here. But let us manage the change and let's make sure that kids learn in the appropriate ways, and let's make sure that regular workers actually don't lose.
I, and I can say anecdotally, my children both were on the iReady system, which I know there are a lot of lawsuits about iReady because my
Awful.
kids' data, their personal information was being shared and sold and disseminated, and that was the real, one of the real costs. But
Yeah,
anecdotally, every day last year for a half hour, my fifth grader back then needed to come home and do iReady on the computer, and it felt to me as somebody who's taught in the past that it was this sort of like pouring in of knowledge
yeah,
without any context, right? Without any struggle, without any intellectual challenge, without
correct.
any discourse, without any dialogue. The teacher was removed from the whole thing. It was a matter of, you need to be on the computer for half an hour. That's it. That's the only criteria. And it was so infuriating, and you could see the motivation just very quickly drained from my child. And fortunately, my wife and I are educated. We understand what, critical thinking means. We were like, go read books. Don't do iReady. Take the 0. Who cares? Like, if it's going to ruin the rest of your career as a kid, as a student, then okay,
And look, I completely agree with you, Sam. And and I've learned a lot because now have this institute. And the number one course that teachers want, because we want teachers to be in the driver's seat. We want them to understand AI. We want them to understand how to use it. But the number one course that teachers want, the number one course that we're teaching, is how do you teach critical thinking in an age of AI? That's the number one course. Because if you're getting so much knowledge or information, whether it's good or bad knowledge, who knows, you know? I mean, you can ask 3 different chat boxes the same question and get 3 different answers
Yeah.
because they just scrape the information. So the real question becomes, what, you know, how do you create kids, again, that what we said earlier on, how to think, the skills and knowledge about how to think. How do they understand context? How do you do the follow-up questions? How do they discern fact from fiction? How do they actually have the skills and knowledge they need that they navigate their lives? And if at the very time that their brains are the most supple, which is, you know, when they're 3, 4, 5, 6, and all we do is put a screen in there. I mean, really, like, so we need to make sure that we're actually doing more things on applied knowledge, on project base, on play, and so kid on relationship building, so that kids can actually have the skills and that knowledge that they need. It doesn't mean that you don't use AI, but why do we need AI facing information for young kids in elementary school? Like why? Like why? And so that's what school is supposed to do, teach kids how to think and how to actually have relationships, how to be able to, you know, to navigate their world.
Absolutely. Randi, I hope that you'll come back and see because it's always such a great conversation with you, and educational issues should be at the front and center of this election. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate both of you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Randi.
Well, Sam, I'm going to make this comment to you because I have too much respect for Randi, but I could not help notice about the robot choice in that segment. They looked like adult robots to me, which I thought was a rather interesting choice when we're talking about AI in the classroom.
It was so it's jarring. The like they've defunded education, they've defunded schools, they've put, you know, shoved a million kids in a classroom, they've overstressed all of the teachers, and they think that the problem that they're trying to address is that students have too much contact with their teacher, with a
Yeah.
human, right?
Right.
Like
I mean,
that's the problem that they're addressing.
Sam, we're parents. Like when you're looking for a school, one of the things you look for is teacher to student ratio. And now
Yes.
we're saying, let's just let it be a robot to student ratio. That'll be fine.
It is wild that like they're like, you know what? It's just my kids spend too much time with humans, right? We need to put them more on computers and more with robots that look, you know, they look like human. It is the creepiest thing, and I think that's why, you know, I was trying to get at this. What is the root cause? I always think about this, like when somebody is doing something bad, you have to kind of unwind and back into their motivation to understand how to argue against it, how to fight it, all of those kinds of things. The motivation here seems only and exclusively power and profit driven. That's it. I don't understand how they could like reasonably, rationally make a claim otherwise.
It just seems like the motto of the Trump administration is let's do as much bad shit as possible right now.
Let's try it.
Yeah.
Let's throw it against the wall, see what sticks.
Let's see what the worst is. I mean, we know that ICE definitely seems like it's the worst. Maybe our policy with Iran is, but you know what? Hey, let's blow up education too.
Yeah. Let's do all this stuff now and then like erase the future for millions and millions of children. It's funny, you know, because the iReady stuff, you know, is getting to this point where like for those of us who are not first gen educated kids or first gen college students or who have some experience in higher ed, our children are going to be probably fine, right? We understand the sort of context of this, but there are a lot of kids whose parents work constantly, who have less experience with formal education and don't know, the substitutes for the iReady stuff, the like screen stuff, and those kids are you can see it very quickly falling behind.
Absolutely. Well, Sam, why don't we talk a little bit about what we have coming up this week on Lincoln Square? We had Simon Rosenberg and Stuart Stevens right before us, which is always a great chat, especially as we're heading into the election. I really look forward to those conversations because those are guys who have been running races for such a long time. And we always say this is the most important election of your lifetime, but it really is.
Yeah. Simon comes, I mean, first of all, just watching the two of them, a historical Republican and a Democrat, come together and sort of spill the tea on process, but then look forward is really illuminating. We'll have that conversation posted probably today.
Yeah.
Happened at 10, and it was a really good one.
Absolutely. We also have Eddie Glaude Jr. joining us once again. This time he'll be on with Frank Figluzzi at 2 today. That should be a great conversation. We have a congressional candidate from Michigan. Sean McMahon is a state senator. And I think this is a seat that may not be on everybody's radar. It's out in West Michigan, which, of course, used to be extremely conservative. It's represented by Congressman Bill Huizenga, who is a huge Trump ally, also has a lot of corruption problems, just like Donald Trump. So I think that will be an interesting race because, every seat counts when you're trying to flip the House. It could come down to a handful of seats. So he will be on with the two Joes on Wednesday.
Amazing. That'll be a great one. Listen, and by the way, I love reading the chat in the two Joes because Joe Klein always gives these responses that the chat is like, what is he saying? And for the most part, Trippy pushes back, but I love that kind of discourse because it lets us into the whole framing of where people who are not kind of outside of our bubble really sit. The chat goes wild.
Yeah.
Rightly so sometimes.
I think we've had some really great debates this primary season. Sometimes they're moderate versus progressive. Sometimes it's a matter of policy, like what should our policy on ICE be? Should it be reform, abolish? What's our way forward? And you get some of that with the Joes. I mean, I don't think, obviously Joe Klein comes at it being a career columnist and outside the Democratic Party. But engaging with these ideas, I think, only makes it for a more healthy process and helps illuminate what our values are.
Yeah, I mean, you can't make an argument unless you know what you're arguing against.
Right. Absolutely. And then also keeping with our continuing coverage of the primary season, we will have Rachel Bidikofer on to break down what the most competitive races are. She's somebody who watches district by district like a hawk. And I'm really interested now that we're almost through primary season to hear what her thoughts are on our odds of flipping the Senate. What are the key House races we should all be keeping an eye on election night? Because, we are what, under 90 days at this point. It's crunch time.
Like 80, they said it on Simon and Stewart, 84 days or 80. Yeah, it's
crazy.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah. Well, before we let you go, we do have our weekly assignment, our call to action. And I know for weeks we were pushing, getting in touch with your senator about Todd Blanche. And just before we get into this, I want to acknowledge it's tough when we lose battles. It just is. Not everything that we're fighting for, we're going to win. It's very hard when Trump and Republicans control everything in Washington, but letting your voice be heard to your senator, to your representatives is still important because there are battles that we have won. And this is an important one that we are asking you to get involved in this week. it is wildfire season. And if you're joining us from the West Coast, from Washington and Oregon in particular, you know that firsthand. These wildfires are devastating. A lot of us have been dealing with really poor air quality because of the wildfires that are burning in Canada. And so at the same time, the Trump administration is trying to take an axe to our Forest Service. And I feel like this is, again, one of those issues that in the avalanche of awfulness has kind of gotten pushed to the side, just like with education. But we know firsthand how devastating it is if you don't have a Forest Service that can respond to these crises, and it can just wipe out communities. And so do your part and contact your member of Congress, because these cuts that the Trump administration is pushing would really destroy so many of our communities, especially out west.
I want to say, in the first term, he talked about how we needed to vacuum up the forests. Do you remember that?
I think he still says that.
He still says that.
We have to rake the forest.
We got to rake it. Yeah. And ultimately, I think that, that became a kind of punchline. But those punchlines, when he says that stuff, the media and all of us kind of laugh and then move on. Don't move on. You have to press him on that, because his misunderstanding of how everything works, literally everything in the world works, is lighting the country and the world on fire. So we have to press back. We can't just laugh this off. We have to press back.
Yes. And we know the Trump administration does not care about climate change. They're, adamant about it. They wipe the EPA website and pretend it doesn't exist. Yeah. We all are dealing with the impacts of climate change and this crisis. And so we need to do whatever we can to fight back, especially when we have the Republican Party that is in complete denial.
Yeah. It's this, man, we've got a lot of work to do, Susan. So much work.
But we get to fight with all of you. And so thank you for being here. And by the way, so many of you, shared very personal stories about student debt, and we really appreciate that. And we will try and do our best to keep this issue front and center, because we know how devastating it is for so many of you. Thank you for tuning in, and please consider subscribing if this is your first time here as well. We'd love to have you.
See y'all.
Great. Thank you.